Welcome back, everybody, to the balance breakdown with myself, Ian O'Neill, and joined as always by the great man himself, Harry Powell. And we were going to obviously not talk about the UFC because we had a UFC free weekend this past weekend, a rarity in these times. But we did have some action in Cage Warriors over in Rome, Cage Warriors 162, and there was the small event of a boxing fight. And it's rare you'll hear us talk about boxing on the Severe MMA network, but the events that transpired in Saudi Arabia are just too big to ignore. Me and Harry are going to share our thoughts on that as well. Thanks for joining us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and tell a friend if you enjoy what you're hearing. If you want to leave a comment, if you're listening on Patreon, go ahead and do that as well. That goes without saying. Sometimes I remember to say that at the start of the podcast, sometimes I do not. And it's more, Harry, along the lines of me forgetting to say stuff. How are you, good sir? And how are things in your
I'm
life?
grand. Can't complain at all. As you can see, my mascot is with me. I told him to go to bed an hour early. We're breaking slight kayfabe again. The clocks have gone back here in the UK, and Mr. Ian O'Neill is living in a perpetual time zone. And yeah, sure, here we are. But weekend was good. Obviously, just an absolutely incredible sporting bout, we should say. Don't think we can call it a fight. Although Tyson Fury did his best to turn it into a fight by landing some elbows. But sure, look, these things happen in boxing bouts. But yeah, fair play to Cage Warriors. I really like just if we just maybe we'll start on the Cage Warriors card, but if we can just touch on the thing I enjoy about Cage Warriors, right, is they really play their position very well, right? They are. This isn't being disrespectful at all, but they know who they are, right? They're not going out and saying we're going to rival the UFC or we're going to rival Bellator or we're going to do this or we're going to do that. What they do is that they consistently churn out events on the European level that produce the next level of talent, right? And what you saw on Saturday night are some fellas who we certainly will be keeping an eye on, right? Up and coming in the Italian MMA scene. But the thing that I really like about these Cage Warriors cards, especially when they go overseas, is you very rarely see a fight that doesn't contain one half, if not both sides, local fighters. And that is a great thing for the local MMA scenes. When they go to Ireland, whether that's Northern Ireland or Southern Ireland, you see Irish bouts en masse. Now, obviously, because of SevereMMA, we often know these Irish fighters, right? But for people that are watching Cage Warriors cards, say, in Italy, it's an introduction to these Irish fighters that they might not have known about before. And for us, the same, right? Now we're watching these Italian fighters. Obviously, we're not following the Italian scene as closely as we're following the Irish scene or maybe even the English or the UK scene. But when we get one of these cards, there are a number of names that we look at and a number of performances, and we can say, "Oh shit, okay. When I see that guy fighting next time, I'm gonna actually take notice. You know, I'm gonna follow that gentleman's career." And I think there's a number of names that we'll break down that Cage Warriors do a fantastic job of highlighting.
Yeah, very well said, Harry. And it's like maybe if I was to kind of come and double down on that with Cage Warriors, they've been doing this for years upon years upon years as well. And I'd like to kind of commend them for saying it as it is in certain terms as well, because you said they are what they are. And they portray themselves to be what they are as well. And the times that I've spoken with Graham Boylan once, he spoke with Shawnee a couple of times, and he's not a guy that's going to sugarcoat an answer to a question. He was asked flat out by Sean the time about fighter pay and stuff, and Graham Boylan said, and I respect him for saying it and being honest, and it's always best to be honest in these kind of situations, because a lot of people can see through a lot of the lies that are dished out on a day-to-day basis in the combat sport world. But Cage Warriors have their formula. They're not going to break their formula, and their formula has been worked. It's been kept them in business for the last 13 years. He acknowledges that we're not paying as much as probably the fighters deserve, and there's no plans to change that because we simply can't afford it. We have to run a business, and we've had to get these fights out. What they do offer, obviously, is opportunity, and it brings me to the next kind of point I had about Graham Boylan and how Cage Warriors like to do things, and that's you know when I asked them the question about the decision to bring it, obviously the last Cage Warriors Dublin show in the RDS, the one before that in the 3 Arena, and it's that transition. And transition is the big word here for Cage Warriors, because we see Cage Warriors and their roster go into a transition or a cycle, as Graham like to describe he described it as a cycle. And he likes to bring these fighters on a 2 to 3 year cycle from, being relatively unknown, starting off their professional career, to building up over the course of those 2 or 3 years within Cage Warriors, to kind of getting there to their championship, whether they defend a title or whether they challenge for a title in their home, in the back, whether it's in Italy or whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Ireland, whatever. They get that cycle, and then it's the result of what happens after that cycle is that you become a champion and you have a damn good chance of getting signed on to the UFC. So it's a level of sacrifice that these fighters at Cage Warriors have to make, but the sacrifice comes early, where you might probably will get your just reward if you go on to the UFC or maybe on to somewhere else after that as well. But one thing that you will get in Cage Warriors, and this is a fact, and I don't know anybody too deeply in there. This is a fact for me based off what I've seen over the last 13 years, and that's you'll be looked after and you'll be matched and you will be built correctly as a fighter. There will be nowhere for you to hide. There'll be no tests that you will be able to avoid in Cage Warriors, and I think that is the key point to me that makes Cage Warrior so successful, and the work that Ian Dean does and Graham Boylan, the fact that you tune in and you're getting the same excellent product every single time. Brad, excellent, and on the boot. Paul Redmond was over there with him in Rome, excellent on the boot. Dan Strauss, when he's there, excellent. We're getting that each and every time. It doesn't stray, so you're tuning in. And I think it's important, if you're to develop a product, especially in the combat sports world, that you know what to expect every time that you tune in, and you kind of get what you pay for, and you accept that, and you enjoy it all that more as well. You know, the mystery and the wonder, and we'll talk about a lot of mystery and wonder because that's what it was heading into the Francis Ngannou boxing fight. You can have mystery and wonder, and that adds. But if you're getting promotion that's all over the place and doesn't really know what it is or who they are, you can kind of be all over the place if you're not building fighters. We spoke about Bellator coming into Ireland and building fighters, and they failed to do that. They failed to do it correctly. They did it very well with Sinead Kavanagh, with Peter Query, and obviously Liam McCourt as well. But they probably had a stable of 25 Irish fighters, and we seem to kind of get the same kind of things week in and week out, and no story, no narrative, nothing to build towards. And you know what? There could be an argument about the PFL card that's coming to Dublin as well, as that where are we going to angle some of these fighters? What are we building off here? What we have in Cage Warriors is we have a promotion that we know where the starting point is. We know what we have to do to get into title contention. We know what we have to do to win the title, and we know what we can expect if we win a Cage Warriors title, and that's a chance to move to greater pastures. And I think having that as your foundation as a promotion is in some terms puts Cage Warriors maybe a little bit head and shoulders above some of its competition, not in terms of maybe financials or anything like that, but on a given path. If a fighter wants to get to a certain place, and that certain place is the UFC, Cage Warriors is the place to do it. And yeah, I mean, I went off on a woeful rant there. That was kind of unexpected, but I think you brought it up. It was an excellent point. I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts as well. And to bring it full circle, this fight night in Rome, Harry, we did get to see a similar enough card, if I may say, that what we got to see in the RDS, in that a lot of fighters on this card, like you excellently said, in transition. not quite there yet to challenge for titles, but on the come up. We've seen professional debuts. We've seen guys, coming off of losses. We've seen guys that are trying to build their win streaks. And we got to see all of that in Rome on Saturday night. We will start with the headliner, if you may. I'm kind of just we can pull and drag from this card. We're not going to cover it from top to tail. Demetrio Gerlian and Simone Patrizi went to battle in the lightweight division in the main event. And speaking about transitions, Gerlian, we would have recognized Gerlian from his loss to Leon Hill earlier on this year. Leon Hill did excellently to get Gerlian out of there. Obviously, that loss sandwiched in between an Adam Cullen win and this win against Patrici on Saturday night. And, Gerlian is one of those guys I think we should be looking to keep an eye on in the lightweight division in Cage Warriors, Harry.
Definitely. Leon Hill is a very, very, very good prospect. And you don't lose any shame, or you don't gain any shame, sorry, by losing to him, right? But we know and we've seen Patrizi's no pushover, right? He's a good fighter, knows his way around a cage, knows his way around a 1-2 and a nice low kick, and we saw that in the first round. In the same vein, Adam Cullen is a good fighter, it's a good win, and it was a great win at the time. Adam Cullen was a lot of hype, a lot of steam behind him, a lot of first round finishes, a lot of all this, and Gerlian went in and dealt with him, and so that was a fantastic win as well. But for me, the story of this specific fight was Patrizi was unable to stop the takedown, and Gerlian was just there's something when you watch fighters, right? And we've talked about this before, but when you're at this level of mixed martial arts, there is an element with which aggression plays a significant portion of whether a fight goes well or goes poorly, right? And Patrizi came in and tried to be a technician. And frankly, watching him from an analytical perspective, on the feet, he flows beautifully, right? Like, he throws nicely and he flows well and he moves between his situations and his sequences really, really nicely. But Gerlian said, yeah, that's fine, but I know that I have the gas tank to be able to throw with more venom and to be able to throw with more vigor. And I know that I'm able to push harder than you are from an aggression and a pace standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so what we were seeing was Patrizi doing his best to try and ward off Gerlian technically. And Gerlian was saying, that's fine, I'm just going to wade on in here. I'm going to throw my hooks. I'm going to throw my big power shots. And when I get to the takedown, I'm not just going to settle in these positions. I'm going to look to pass. I'm going to look to land shots. I'm going to look to ground you out. I'm going to look to tire you as you drag yourself up on the canvas. And that alone tells me something about Gerlian, right? When you look at somebody like a Paul Hughes, who obviously should not be a Cage Warriors fighter anymore, he should be fighting in the UFC, but fair play. You look at someone like a Morgan Charrier, you look at a Jordan Vucenic, when you look at a Harry or a George Hardwick, there is a level of venom, right? There's a level of aggression. There's a level of I don't want to say nastiness because it's not emotional, right? But there's a level of physicality that comes with their fighting styles. And I think it's what really cuts you at the elite level. Because if you go in and you watch a UFC level competition, you're going to see both guys, when they land shots, they land and they land hard, they land clean, they land with bad intentions. And I think the ability to land with bad intentions is a necessary part of an MMA fighter's career. And we absolutely saw Gerlian show that in spades in the main event.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, aggressiveness and pressure, looking back at this fight, would be the two primary words that I would use for a lot of these fights and why people were successful in getting wins in some of these fights. I mean, you could say similar enough thing about the co-main event, Simone Diana and Albert Diaz. You could say the same similarly maybe about Nicholas LeBlanc and his win over Michelangelo Lupoli as well. Just to finish off about Gerlian, he got in and got the job done. He's back on the horse. A good experience for him to go look at fighting at home, but technically behind enemy lines in fighting a Roman fighter, with him coming in, obviously being based out of Italy as well, but I believe he's based out of Verona. So, getting those experiences at a domestic level is very, very important. But it was the patience from him in the end, whereas he didn't rush to try and find the finish. He let the finish come to him. and he did so quite well by getting that rear naked choke in the third round. So fair play to him. Simone Diana versus Albert Diaz, nothing really to write home about in this fight. I think Simone, like we said about the main event, Harry, he came out and pressed the action a little bit and kind of felt probably stronger in a lot of positions in this fight. Didn't push for the finish, and the finish didn't come. He was happy to go and win a comfortable, really, it has to be said, unanimous decision. But not too much to talk about in this fight, really.
He just outmuscled Diaz. Again, Diaz looked like if and I'm gonna say, just we'll get there. If I was to sit a 6, 7, 8-year-old person down and they said, oh, I want to learn how to throw a punch, I want to learn how to throw a kick, I want to learn how to fight at my range, I want to learn how to do all these things. If you were to pick one of the fighters, you'd pick Diaz and you'd say, look at the way he turns his knuckles over on a jab. Look at the way he tries to fade away. Look at the way he tries to move his head out of shots. Look at the way he tries to angle when he's stepping away from his combinations. And all of that's grand. Like, it's grand. And then you have Diana, who's just like, yeah, all of that's fucking great and fine, whatever. But what about if I just keep putting fists in your face?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw an overhand right here, and I'm going to hit you straight into the mush, and then everyone is going to forget about what you're trying to do. He just did that all fight, really, didn't he?
Right. And there's an element, I think, where, beautiful MMA, technical MMA, perfect form and stance and this and that is one thing, but it's a fucking fight at the end of the day. Like, and if one fella can hit you harder than you can hit him and you can't gain the respect, and then he gets to your hips and he puts you down and he realizes you can't stop the takedown, all that technique doesn't fucking matter. Like, so to me, the Taylor fight was very much similar to the first one. I think Gullion is obviously a cut above, and he's got that viciousness, that intention, that willingness, and to search for the finish. But I was impressed with Diana's gritty, hard-nosed approach. That's how you win fighters against. That's how you win fights against more technical fighters.
Absolutely, it is. That's 3 wins in a row for him. His first win, obviously, under the Cage Warriors banner, I believe it was, unless he fought earlier in his career. No, he didn't. So, with Diana, that's another favorable addition into the 145-pound division for Cage Warriors. Obviously, like you said, we're going to be losing Paul Hughes, I would say. I would tend to imagine, when we've already lost him out of the 145-pound division. I don't know, Harry. I'm a sucker for tournaments, but there's a real tournament shaping up there at 145 in Cage Warriors for that vacant title. There's a lot of contenders going on there. Well, 10-4 for Diana now. It'll be interesting to see if he can get his name into the mix. Pressure and aggression is the kind of talking point here, and we can say Nicholas LeBlanc had that in abundance when he went in there and took out Michelangelo Lupoli by a second round knockout. And it was an absolutely devastating uppercut. But the writing was on the wall for a kind of a finish like this in this fight, because these two boys decided they were going to go out there and they were going to try and match each other's aggression, match each other's forward pressure, and just throw bombs. And that's what they did. And I think it was LeBlanc who was kind of on the front foot a little bit more in this fight. Was getting off the better work, looked comfortable in the clinch exchanges, in the grappling exchanges, and just unleashed holy hell in that second round. Obviously LeBlanc dropped Lupoli first with a kind of a jab, I think a straight jab. And then as Lupoli was getting up, he left himself completely exposed, took an uppercut, and was just left flat unconscious on the side of the cage. Harry, was devastating knockout and a really, really good win for Nicholas LeBlanc, whose record suggests he isn't as good as what he is, in my opinion. Anyway, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I wasn't impressed by Lupoli, if I'm really honest. He wasn't able to offer anything that stopped the LeBlanc forward pressure, right? Like, LeBlanc's footwork was beautiful. He was offering the jab really, really nicely, teep really, really nicely. He was pumping that left hand in as much and as often as he possibly could. The check right hand was nice from him. But Lupoli was either not throwing anything and just trying to feint his way out against that cage where LeBlanc was cage cutting so nicely, or he would just try and wing a massive shot in. And then it got to the point where he didn't throw a teep, right? There wasn't any attempt to jab his way out of that position. There wasn't any attempt to try and maybe throw a counter takedown in. So LeBlanc had to really think about things. He just stood there. And eventually, after he'd, tried to goad and jeer LeBlanc into coming in over aggressively. He just bites down on his mouthpiece and is like, fuck it, I guess I'm just going to have to throw kitchen sinks at the man. And that's not the way you answer that question. Like, it's just not the way you answer that problem.
Well, we found what the result of that tactic was towards the end of the fight, where, you know, you just can't. Yeah, you need to be mixing it up in there, and like you said, fighting sometimes forward pressure with forward pressure, it works, but it doesn't work when you're constantly on the back foot, and that's what Lupoli tend to kind of happen in the. It was a sweet knockout, though. I think it was very well placed shot by
Beautiful.
LeBlond. Yeah,
Beautiful.
very good, very good. I definitely checked that out if you haven't seen it. Moving quickly through the next couple of fights, Leon Aliu took out Alan Carlos by unanimous decision. Not nothing to write home about. I thought that win and that finish was there for Aliu to take. I don't think he did take it, and he'll be disappointed that he didn't. In the fight next to it in 135, that of course was last fight was at 185 in the bantamweight division. Luka Iovine, the bout was ended in a no contest with Andrei Tischenko. Multiple kicks to the balls there for Luka Iovine, and very, very glad that the decision was made to call it a no contest. I think he's well within his rights not to continue. I mean, how did it get to 3 without even a point being taken is beyond me. I think, I don't know. It's probably a conversation for another day, Harry, but, what we do with ball shots or low blows in MMA, something needs to happen. I think, because it's happening far, far too much. Maybe we go through spells where it happens more often than not, but a very big gray area. You can basically go out there in mixed martial arts and kick someone straight into the nuts and get away with it playing free right now, and it's crazy.
It really is. I wrote in my notes that I don't see how this isn't a disqualification, frankly.
Yeah, like, how is it not? Like,
I think of the 4 bull shots, one was unfortunate. One was definitely one where he certainly threw with intention to. I don't think any of them was intentionally to the balls, right? But one was definitely, it caught the inside thigh and then rode up. And I get it. That's a really unfortunate, especially when you make contact with the thigh and you just ride up and the angle and whatever. But there was a couple, especially the right knee.
It comes back to a moving opponent and a non-moving opponent. I think you explained it perfectly when we were talking about Ankalaev and Johnny Walker that time, is that, yeah, okay, you can nab an illegal shot when someone is on the move and a shot can slide up the leg, etc. But when you're facing a primarily static kind of opponent, or if you're up against the cage, there's kind of less empathy you can have for someone who does land an illegal blow, because you need to be aware of where you're throwing your shots. And if you're not sure, you just don't throw it, really, don't you not?
No, you don't. And I mean,
Yeah.
even when Tashenko landed with the right knee, it was just such a weird, like, you never see. And just to describe this very slightly, Tashenko had an overhook on his right arm, and obviously, Iovine had an underhook with his left arm, and Iovine's left hip was turned into the right hip of Tashenko, and he was looking just to gain head position and jostle in that position, whatever it is. Generally, when we see knees being thrown, Tashenko would be looking for either wrist control or an inside bicep tie on the left hand, and he'd be throwing the left knee either to the liver or the solar plexus or the abs or whatever it is, whatever he can get hold of it, right? You might even sometimes see they throw him to the thigh to try and create some distance from the hips in order for him to turn his hips out. But instead, he threw his right knee, and like, the right knee isn't going to hit anything. Like, the only way it was ever going to land is just by glancing the cup, and that's exactly what happened. And I just thought, like, I understand that these aren't, as you said, a lot of these fighters are in transition. They're coming up in their career. They're starting to establish their name. But when in training are you throwing that? Like, when are you seeing a coach is doing some cage wrestling or some clinch work against the fence, and he's like, right, lads, what we do is we throw our right knee from here. Like, I just I don't know. I don't understand. But
Moment of madness. It likely should, like, maybe that's what we need to do, and have more consequence on the result, and kind of focus on it, because that's a no contest now. It doesn't go down as a win or a loss in any fighter's records. And obviously, Iovine very unlucky in that situation in a competitive fight. Your guy Sam Creasy put on a very good performance in getting the finish over Tanio Palluccio, potentially difficult opponent, but he went out and handled them relatively easily. Harry overall landed a couple of nice shots on the feet before getting the fight down. and finished it by a rear naked choke in round 2. Were you impressed by his performance? Obviously, you're way more equipped to talk about Sam, having spoken with him many a time.
Yeah, so I think this was a veteran performance from Sam. I think the first half of the first round, he really struggled to get his range. I think I'm going to butcher this fella's name as well.
Pagliariccio.
Pagliariccio
Pagliariccio.
was just doing a really good job of being first. You know, he was doing a good job of sticking a jab in Sam's face. There was some really nice low kicks from him. He was doing a good job of making sure he wasn't available for the check left hook that Sam was throwing. Sam, I think, was not on his toes enough. He was sitting into his shots a little bit too much and sort of moved away from some of the Sam Creasy that we'd seen maybe in the last 2 or 3 fights. But he sort of gathered himself at the end of that first round and was doing a far better job of finding his own jab. He was timing Pagliariccio's shots and he was landing some really nice low kicks. It's not often that you see low kicks land to the back of the hamstrings, but he'd managed to cut an angle really, really well a number of times and landed fantastically well. And then halfway through the second round, we saw the first grappling exchange where Sam dove in on a body lock and hit a really lovely mat return, which was a sort of he leg pinched and Pagliariccio managed to defend that, and then he squared back up and then went immediately back to the same technique, dropped him into side control, forced Pagliariccio to react, took the back, and we were finished with a belly down choke. And like Sam really showed, in my opinion, what you should be doing from that specific position where he's got both hooks in. He's not opted for a body triangle. He's stretching his opponent out. He's landing lots and lots of shots from the top. The referee's calling it. Pagliariccio has to do something. And so he starts to posture and he gives up the choke. And like, that to me is 101 how you finish an MMA fight when it hits the mat. You take them down into a dominant position. You force them to react. You put them in a worse position. Belly down, in my opinion, belly down back mount is the most dominant position in MMA. And he did exactly what he needed to do. He landed loads of shots. He wasn't just immediately searching for chokes. He took the choke when it came. And that's just a beautiful veteran performance for him to warm up into the fight, make his reads, capitalize on those reads, and then get his man out there. Great stuff.
Perfect. Move to 18-5. Sam Creasy did. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he goes. He's up there with the elite in the flyweight division in Cage Warriors, and it'll be interesting to see what's next for him. Scooting through the rest of the card real quickly, Harry. I'm not going to go through every single fight, but I will talk about the next fighter that was on the card, and that's Samir Sadikov. He was one that really stood out to me in this card, making his professional debut. Looked very promising and polished for a 0-0 guy making his debut, in my opinion. And I think a shout out has to be give to Baris Adiguzel, who absolutely landed a devastating knockout on Alex Bertonazzi after 16 seconds. That was one of the scariest knockouts that I've seen in quite some time. In the reaction and the recovery of Bertonazzi, glad to see him doing well and, you know, making his way out of the cage on both of his own 2 legs as well. You know, that was a scary knockout, Harry. You know, Sadikov, Adiguzel. Oh, I butchered it the second time around. Anyone stand out for you, Harry, in... You know, I thought Martinoni looked good as a 2-0 guy at the start of the card as well. Anybody else stand out to you?
Yeah, so I wrote down about Martignoni that he looked good, but he's not going to be able to fight like that forever. Just way too quick out of the blocks. You could tell after the round 1 that he was struggling to keep up in round 2, but he was just genuinely a better fighter than the fella he was competing against. I think you're obviously right to pick out Sadikov. That was just, I mean, that was
serious talent there for an early professional, like, isn't it?
I mean, like, my note is literally half a line, and it's single leg, rear naked choke to sleep, awful opponent. Like, just
Yeah.
it was about as close to an absolutely nothing fight as you could even imagine. It was just an unbelievable display, as you say, especially for somebody so young in his career. I think we've kind of mentioned, but I liked the Teti and Barbara fight. Teti just went out and was like, I like hooks, and so I'm going to throw lots of them. And, you know, fair play to him. He landed a ton of shots. But as you say, all in all, I think the card was good. It was a good transition card. It's going to be very interesting when we see some of these fighters in 3 to 4 years, right? See where they are, see how they've progressed. And maybe we're going to see some of these in the future fighting for Cage Warriors titles, or at least fighting up in the rankings in Cage Warriors. But there are obviously some of them, like, Ali versus Carlos, that probably shouldn't fight MMA anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's very well said. But that wraps up another good card in Cage Warriors, another successful stint. Fair play to them. And we shall move on. Let's talk about the juiciness around this boxing fight. And I almost have to dust myself off here before I get going. So many thoughts. I'm going to get this started off about how I felt about all of this before the action happened. And I wasn't too happy that Francis had to go over to boxing, to be honest. I was wary about this fight. I was wary about Francis leaving the UFC. Not so much publicly, but we had lots of conversations behind the scenes, and I didn't want to be too critical of it or too kind of for it without actually seeing it in the full picture. But we have the full picture now, Harry. We've seen what happened on Saturday night, and I guess just my explanation about, I'm always was very, very happy to see Francis get paid, and I think the big problem here, and the reasoning behind a lot of this moving and shaking was that the UFC were not willing to pay Francis what he thought he was valued, and they're well within their rights to think that. Um, I look at this as an MMA purist because that's what I am. I love mixed martial arts and I want what's best for mixed martial arts, and I want what's best for mixed martial arts fighters. So Francis going over to boxing as a mixed martial artist, I was happy that he was going over there. I was unhappy that he had to make the move to get paid his value. Those are things that are talked about time and time again within mixed martial arts. Um, I was worried about the outcome of the fight because I didn't want another embarrassing night for the sport of mixed martial arts, or if you want to call it a sport, whatever you want to call it. And I think heading into this fight, if you were to give Francis Ngannou any chance at all, you would have been either delusional, you would have been a genius, you would have been probably damn right insane to think it, to be honest, in reality, based off what we had seen from Francis in the past, and based off the history of MMA fighters going over and fighting in boxing. I just thought it was all a bad idea. Well, we can throw all of that out the window now, Harry, because he went in there and fucking beat Tyson Fury. My God, on Saturday night. First question I have for you: in combat sports history, where does that moment land? Because it's a pretty damn fucking big moment, if we have to say so ourselves. We were texting throughout, kind of wondering this, that, and the other. Maybe your thoughts. Maybe your thoughts first on maybe how you felt about the fight going in, and then maybe we can talk about the actual occasion itself. We can go into the fight a little bit, and of course talk about the aftermath a little bit later on. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts here, sir.
So I'll start with the easy question, and that's the fight itself, right? I was watching it fully aware that I could not quantify the magnitude of what was happening. It was one of those moments where I was watching and I couldn't believe truly what I was seeing, right? Now, the only time that I've felt like that before in combat sports is Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo. It's the only time I felt like, what the fuck is happening? Now, with the Conor Jose situation, it was more visceral because it was such a quick knockout, right?
Yeah, and I
And
think with Conor and Aldo, it was like more so the timing of it, more so than like the timing of how quickly he did it was the biggest shock. Not the fact that he was able to connect and hurt Aldo. I think that was there already, and but it's the one fight that I was thinking of too in comparison to the holy shit moment. It was a holy shit moment, and continue before I get into it, however.
so what impressed me the most about the fight wasn't that he dropped Tyson, because Tyson has been dropped before by big punches, and Tyson is now not just big punches, but legitimate boxers, right? One, sure, but it's also Francis Ngannou is a freak, right? And I think a jab could have knocked a fella down. So it wasn't so much that he knocked him down that was impressive to me, or at least not the most impressive. The most impressive was his ability to contend with Tyson. It was his ability to gain Fury's respect early by his technical skills, right? It wasn't just that Tyson Fury was like, fuck, he hits hard, lads. Because it's not like Tyson Fury hasn't felt lads that hit hard before. It's not like he doesn't train with fellas that hit hard, right? That's absolutely not the problem here. And I don't think it's the problem that Francis has scary, insane, like one human of a lifetime power. I am sure that when Deontay Wilder hits you, it fucking hurts like,
100%.
right?
When
And
Deontay Wilder hits you, you start questioning your life decisions, I would imagine.
right. And so the power, I think we shouldn't overplay that. All right.
No.
It's the fact that Francis was able to switch stances and be effective in both stances. Tyson goes southpaw, and Francis is like, "You want to do southpaw? No problem, big man. We'll do that." And you could see Tyson going back to his corner, and his coaches are like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, why do you not just box with the fella? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that?" And then the coaches in Francis Ngannou's corner are saying, "This is perfect. This is exactly what you need to be doing. Just keep drawing him out. Keep drawing him out." And this was I just couldn't believe my eyes that minute after minute, not only was Francis able to manage his cardio, which was a huge issue for Conor McGregor when he fought Floyd Mayweather,
Yep.
but he also was able to ask Tyson Fury questions. He went to the body beautifully. He sold Tyson Fury on some gorgeous pull right hands. He caught him with check left hooks. He bust him up with some gorgeous right hands over the top. And he, by the end of the fight, I think if Francis had really stepped on the gas, then the scorecards would have looked different because it would have been above and beyond. Now, I totally understand why Francis did not do that, but in the
And
same
maybe his cardio was kind of getting to him a little bit. But there's a difference between not having the cardio to throw killer shots and not having cardio at all, where you're completely gassed out inside there and being kind of somewhat defenseless, which in certain terms I was kind of waiting to happen in the fight, and it never did. Or it felt like I was waiting for Tyson Fury to kind of click into action, but he was never allowed to click into action by Francis. Tyson Fury, what he was so successful in doing against Deontay Wilder was clinching and putting his weight on Deontay Wilder and frustrating Deontay Wilder, drawing the blood to his arms, and that makes it harder for you to get off those snappy, hard shots that Deontay Wilder does so well. Well, he tried to Fury tried to do that against Francis. Well, Francis said, "Guess what, son? I've been in the clinch for the last 7, 8, 9 years, and this is nothing to me. I'm completely in control in this position." And not alone was he in control of the clinch, but he was landing damage in the clinch as well with his dirty boxing. Caught him with an uppercut, black in the eye with an uppercut, landed that check left hook. To me, the knockout is very significant because of the pictures and the videos and everything that come after the fact. Is that, we can say that it was a good fight, but those pictures are iconic. That's an iconic picture of Francis. I almost said Muhammad Ali, but it reminds you of the Ali photo with Tyson down and Francis looking over him. I mean, that's like, I'm like, I'm saying I was disparaging this fight. I'm almost thinking and looking at that picture and saying, I got to put that shit in a frame and put it in my house somewhere. It was almost so iconic in combat sports. And we didn't know what we were looking at, Harry, because we didn't know what we were looking at. What were we looking at there? We didn't expect this in the slightest. And it was just this historic moment that was playing out in front of our eyes. And, the knockout was important to me because of what happened after the fact, because I had a suspicion that, you know, he was going to have to get Fury out of there if he was going to get the win. You know, you've got to realize that boxing needs to save face, and when you've got Fury and Usyk on tap, you can't give a decision win to Francis Ngannou. So I think they actually did him the best favor that they possibly could in giving him a split decision, to be honest. But the knockout is the key here. It's what you can sell other fights off of. It's an iconic picture that will be remembered for many years and years to come. And it's just proof that, you know, Francis is an absolute motherfucker, man. I mean, what can't this guy do? What a story this guy has to come on over and come through all of the hurdles as an immigrant over in France, to moving over to the States for it not working out. You know, having been basically thrown under the bus by his team in France before moving over to Extreme Couture after that first fight title loss to Stipe Miocic, to come back and beat Miocic, to come back and beat Cyril Gane on one leg and showcase that he can develop. And I guess it was foolish of us, Harry, to think that, you know, he was going to come in here with the level of boxing skills that he had showcased in mixed martial arts, which were not good, to be honest. They were wild. They were all over the place, but he had since honed those skills, and it seemed he honed them quite well. And I think we have to give a certain level of respect to his team and Eric Nixick and Dewey Cooper as well in getting him prepared as best as he could. And, you know, people can compliment Mike Tyson, but that's a PR. It was a PR stunt. He was there holding pads for him for only a short period of time, I would imagine. The real work went in with Eric Nixick and with Dewey Cooper, and they did a phenomenal job in getting Francis primed to fight a competitive fight with the heavyweight champion of the world. That's what we need to keep saying here. The heavyweight champion of the boxing world was put on test by Francis Ngannou in his first ever boxing fight. Phenomenal, Harry. Phenomenal.
Yeah, so I mean, like, the reason why we need to keep saying that too is because still to this point we don't understand the magnitude of what's happened. Like, that this story will only be told 10, 15 years from now, when both men have hung up the gloves in their respective sports. Both men have sort of drifted off into the retirement with their families and their money and their this and their that. And really the legacy of that story will start to play out. And I think that I agree entirely that Dewey Cooper and Eric Nixick should get massive, massive props here. But I think that the real props go to Francis. And that's not for the performance on the night even necessarily, right? Like, he should get all the plaudits for that. But his ability to be a student, I think, is unbelievable. His ability, and again, I think this is obvious, and it's so hard to be the general after the battle. It's so easy to be the general after the battle, as we say. But if we look at Francis's life, right, the way he came up from digging in the sand mines to being sent to the desert 6 times or 7 times, whatever it is, to sleeping rough in France, to then sleeping in a boxing gym, and then finding his way to MMA through Paris, and then the move to America, and then the UFC heavyweight title, and then the this, and then the that, and then the next thing. Every time he's been counted out, but every time in the face of that adversity, he's remained humble. He's remained a student of life. And I think one thing that's so obvious now coming into it is he took this bout with Tyson Fury, not just for the money. Obviously, the money has a large factor in it, but he took it because he genuinely believed that he could win it. He genuinely believed that he could take this opportunity, hone the skills he had, and he backed on himself, not in a way that other fighters back on themselves or say, oh, it's fine, I'll put a camp in and it'll be fine. No, there's a level of depth here that we haven't recognized, that Francis Ngannou is able to back himself, not to just do the work, quote unquote, but to strip back everything he thinks he knows about something and submit to a brand new sport, a brand new set of techniques, a brand new set of skills. Now he has a head start, some of the MMA stuff, and you touched on it, and I was going to talk about this too. The clinch work from Francis, you could see that Fury had no fucking idea what was
He
going on.
hadn't a clue when he clinched up and felt probably the strength and then the control. I guarantee you that Tyson Fury never felt that before in his life.
And Francis was using just a stiff arm frame, just used
Yeah.
a stiff arm frame, a forearm across the face, and was landing uppercuts. And Fury was like, but this isn't how we do boxing clinches. Big man, this isn't a boxing clinch, right? We're clinching here. This isn't a boxing clinch. This is a clinch. And I just I couldn't say more wonderful things about the character of Francis to be able to not just risk it all, quit the UFC, bank on yourself, go to PFL, broker the deal at PFL, but to then broker a deal to fight Tyson Fury, just even to get the fight is an incredible achievement. Let
Unbelievable.
alone to go in with the humility that he must have gone in with to that training camp and to then come out under the massive lights. They built a stadium for him in 90 days. Now, let's not talk about how they built it or what the costs of the building it were, because we'll be here all day.
The cost of the event, like, I mean, Jesus, the who's who were there. I mean, there was money thrown at this left, right, and center, but whatever. However, yeah, that's a conversation for another day. This is more of a celebration of Francis and what he was able to achieve in believing in himself and not believing in what other people were telling him, you know. Dana White was out there, and I don't want to turn this into a fucking fuck the UFC kind of a thing either, but Dana White and the UFC didn't make things easy for Francis in trying to get out of his contract, in matching him with difficult circumstances, and openly de-promoting one of their champions and one of their fighters as well, and kind of filling everybody's head with nonsense, to be real, saying that he did not want to take a chance, he was not up for challenge as well. Francis just took that opinion and scrumped it up and put it in the garbage bin, to be honest, because there's no greater risk that he could have taken than going out of a sport that he was comfortable in into a brand new sport at the very, very, very highest level under the brightest lights. And it's just phenomenal. Like, I mean, we're 2 or 3 days out. I don't think I've fully processed how I feel about it. It's something that we were both eager to talk about and just like at least start the conversation. But like you said, this story is going to be talked about. This story is not finished yet by any means. This opens up so many more doors for other fighters and opens up the eyes, I hope, of some promoters as well, and maybe fans of the overall setup within the pay structure of mixed martial arts, or maybe opening up the opportunities. And I think the sad thing about all of this, you know, I opened up saying I'm an MMA purist. The sad thing is, in reality, we've probably lost Francis to boxing now at this stage. I don't think there's a damn chance he comes back and fights for a prolonged period of time of mixed martial arts. And too right too, Harry, too right. Why would he come back?
So I think that the only way he comes back is a co-promotion between the PFL and the UFC, and that's just never going to happen. Like, and it's not going to happen because Dana White will never swallow that humble pie. It will just not happen.
Never. One of the most bitter men that you'll ever come across. Where I another thing, I'm just so curious to hear what he has to say about this, or if he tries to pour cold water on it. Because at this stage, I think Harry, Dana White just has to eat that humble pie, and I think it would be better for him to say, you know what, fair play to Francis. He took a gamble, it paid off. Fair play to him, but I can't see those words coming out of his mouth.
I don't know. I feel like he actually saves face if he does that. Right?
Yeah, I think he does. I think it's the most wisest thing that he could do. Maybe he will. He's smarter than we give him credit for, but he does say a lot of stuff, and he is a guy that does hold grudges too. I mean, when we're talking about the UFC here, who blanked off, was it Kamaru Usman's or Israel Adesanya's T-shirt that had Francis Ngannou's name on it? You know, when we're getting to that level of pettiness, I mean, you know, I won't be holding my breath for Dana White to give Francis his trumps or his kudos, to be honest.
Sure, because the problem, right, and the reason, just to back what you're saying, is PFL aren't going to be able to sign a heavyweight that that's gonna test Francis, right? Like the
You
guy
had
out.
Don Davis on the MMA Hour today saying, right? This is what he's saying, that there is nobody in mixed martial arts right now that would draw the level of interest that Francis Ngannou expects. Like, he's dead right in what he's saying, but on the same hand, he's just shitting all over his own heavyweight roster in PFL, which I found quite strange. But he's really right in what he's saying, Harry. There's nothing that's going to really get the interest going as much as maybe another boxing fight, or the only fight in mixed martial arts, like Don Davis said, and like you're suggesting, is Francis versus John Jones, and it's simply not going to happen, which is sad, which is what we want to see from an MMA purist perspective. But, we'll take this rare win for these crossover fights. We'll accept the consequences, and we can get maybe a little bit excited about the future and what it holds for Francis.
Yeah, because I don't think Francis will be. I think that Francis still holds a flame for MMA, and I still think he understands what his role is in MMA and his same role in life. And so, look, if he goes out and he performs for the PFL, whoever it is, if he's still going out and he's boxing an Anthony Joshua or an Andy Ruiz or a Joseph Parker or a Deontay Wilder, or, just fucking put the heavyweight name in there, and Alexander Usyk, a Fury rematcher, whoever it is, that's going to draw an insane amount of numbers. And some of those numbers, if and when he goes and fights in the PFL or wherever it is he goes, there will be some crossover numbers without a shadow of a doubt. Now, in the same vein that when you looked, and I'm not saying, just bear with me, but like when Mike Tyson went and fought, he didn't really give a shit who Mike Tyson was fighting, right? You didn't really give a shit. You just wanted to see how quickly could he destroy that man. And so I think when Francis goes back to MMA, whenever that is, if that ever is, I don't think it matters as much as people think it does who he's matched against. Now, if you could make the John Jones fight, then fuck me, boysies, strap yourselves to your seats because we're going to the fucking moon. But we all know that's never going to happen. And
I think with the PFL thing, it's like what he is promising his opponent is at least a guaranteed 2 million pay. And to be honest, you want to get that. If you're PFL, you want to get your value for your money for that 2 million as well, to be honest. And if we're being real, there's not too many heavyweights outside of the UFC. Look at this whole Bellator kind of PFL merger may have a part to play in who Francis fights next. But that being said, there's not really anybody in the heavyweight division in Bellator too that I would be super excited to see. It's very, very curious. And I guess the last question is, Harry, how do you see Francis lining up against the likes of Wilder, Anthony Joshua, or who would you think would be the smartest move for him if he's legitimately going to try and make a run at boxing or try and win a title or something like that? One name sprang to mind to me, but it's kind of completely outside the narrative that's being talked right now. I'll offer my suggestion first. I'll hand it over to you. I think a good winnable fight for him is that Anthony Ruiz, for the guy that beat Joshua before. There you have a former world champion, and a guy that is, I would tend, after watching what I watched there, he has a good chance of beating him. But you're dealt with the chance that Ruiz beats Ngannou again, and then you kind of lose all the hype after that. So it's a kind of a tricky situation, and you're nodding your head there to kind of suggest, I would imagine, that it's got to be one of the bigger guys. It's either got to be Wilder or it's got to be AJ next for Ngannou. If of course, obviously the Fury rematch is going to be a high priority.
So I think that the answer is Joshua. And I think the reason the answer is Joshua is a very fundamental, well put together fighter, right? But he doesn't carry a huge amount of power. And in the same vein, he seems to be declining, right? He seems to be unsettled in his career. He's changed camps 3 or 4 times for the last couple of fights. He's getting older, like in his just his genetic age or whatever.
A little bit chinny too.
And this is where I was going to go. And a little bit chinny, right? So if you make the Ngannou bout, that's a winnable fight against a legitimate, multiple-time world champion. I think the toughest fight genuinely is Deontay Wilder. And it's just because both of them are going to stand there. Neither one really wants to throw too much. And yes, Francis has got a fantastic chin and all of this stuff, but Wilder's got scary power too, right? And we saw what happened. Francis is susceptible to a knockout, right? Alistair Overeem snapped his neck into the fifth dimension. And so that can certainly happen. But I think for me, that the boxer, quote unquote, over a puncher is actually a more sensible fight for somebody like Francis Ngannou, because the boxer is somebody that, yeah, okay, he can land, he could hit me 50 times. I just have to catch him once, right? Whereas
And like
somebody
the
like
confidence that Francis is going to bring into the next fight as well, Harry. It's
right,
like, because we talked about Fury and the unknowns and not knowing what Francis was going to bring in, having not seen him there. But Francis had a lot of unknowns about himself as well, and now he knows he has the power that can drop elite level heavyweights in boxing, and man, that's gonna spring him on so much in Tanny. It's going to be boxing next for me. There's no doubt about it. I imagine we'll see Francis back in there probably March next year. We'll see after that what happens, but very, very exciting times. And we normally, like I said, do not talk about these kind of fights on the SevereMMA channel, but just given the monumental occasion that we witnessed and a rare good night for mixed martial arts, Harry, as well. It was very heartwarming. I was, as a guy who was critical of the fight beforehand, I said I'm not going to come out here and give it the big one without acknowledging that. There's some people that might want to rub it in your face, but whatever, that's fine. I'll hold my hand in. I'll be honest and say, yeah, I wasn't big on this fight, but I was gladly proven wrong, and I would gladly be proven wrong on an occasion like this. What does the result mean? We've talked about what it means for Francis, maybe for Fury. I mean, he's gone back to the drawing board again. What does this result mean for mixed martial arts, Harry?
I don't know. Is the honest answer? Like, I don't know, because the odd thing is Francis has just catapulted himself to stardom in another sphere of combat sports. And so for sure it will elevate MMA in some fashion. Whether it elevates MMA because now people know Francis as an MMA fighter, maybe they go and start to watch his back catalog, maybe they go and they see some viral knockouts, they learn about some UFC fighters, maybe they learn about the PFL deal and tune into that. Like, whatever it is, I think in some fashion it will elevate MMA. However, it's also to me the feeling of the rhetoric online, which I don't think is quite true, but it's like, oh, Francis has moved on to bigger and better things, and the bigger and better thing is boxing. And whilst I think that bigger in terms of pay packet, for sure,
Yes.
in
The only
terms,
thing, it's really the only thing. It's not better. The only if those pay packets are available in mixed martial arts, you'd be back there in an instant,
I'd say so too. Now I think that obviously boxing is older, and I'd say the fan base is probably larger and more staunch across the world. But I don't think the better side is something certainly I would contend with. I just think that because Francis is who he is and was coming in for his first professional fight against somebody like Tyson Fury, the spectacle felt so much larger. In the same vein, if Tyson Fury came out for his first professional mixed martial arts fight against Francis Ngannou and put on a similar level of performance, I think we'd be sat here and we'd be waxing lyrical just as much as we are on the reverse side, right? And we'd be talking about how an insane spectacle it is that Tyson came in and was able to stuff takedowns and land low kicks and drop elbows and this and that and the next thing, right?
He tried to drop a few elbows there in the fight.
Sure he did. Sure he did. Sure. These things happen in boxing,
They surely do, yeah.
But yeah, what does it mean for MMA? For the same thing, I think we got to wait for the dust to settle before we can really answer that question. But I can't see how it's a negative for MMA on sort of en masse. I don't really, other than that we lose Francis, obviously. But like,
yes,
In terms of bringing eyes to the sport, I don't really see how it's a negative.
Well, to be honest with me, this past year, the last couple of years with the crossover boxing or the influencer boxing, I should say, that it's influencer boxing. Francis versus Fury was crossover boxing, if you want to call it that, for me. But I thought MMA was becoming a little bit of a laughing stock due to the results that Jake Paul were able to kind of muster up and everything like that. And all of that was like shining a bright light on mixed martial arts, and people were disparaging the skill set of these guys, in an uneducated manner, because, they're just basing it off a boxing bout, not what would happen if the roles were reversed. And we all know what would be happening in many occasions. Go back and ask your James Tonys and other people like that who were brave enough, and kudos to him for coming over and making that jump. But the reality of the situation is that this was a win for mixed martial arts and the legitimacy of mixed martial arts and people coming over there. Something that even Conor McGregor was unable to achieve when he went in there against Floyd Mayweather. So we have to give Francis Ngannou absolute kudos for that. Why do we love combat sports? Why do we love fighting? It's for moments like we witnessed on Saturday night. When I'm sitting on the couch, Olivia was out minding her own business in the kitchen, half looking at the fight. But when there's a roar coming from me and a roar coming from the TV, and Olivia feels it's important enough that she needs to run in from the kitchen to see what's happening, you got yourself a big fight there. And she didn't budge herself from the TV until it was all over as well. So that's capturing in the imagination of people as well. That's highlighting mixed martial arts and where Francis came from. I thought, number one, the broadcast did very well to kind of label this boxing versus MMA and kind of create that separation. Number two, we don't need full-on music festivals in between fights. It was way too long. But look at Saudis, that's what they'll do. They'll throw money at it. But overall, it was a monumental occasion for combat sports, and one that we'll be talking about for many, many years to come, Harry. And I think we can just wrap it up for now. I think this is a kind of a moment in time that we're going to be talking about for quite some time. I hope you enjoyed it. At BJJ_Harry Powell is where you'll find that man, at O'Neill MMA, as I said at the top. Give us a like, give us a follow, share with a friend. We really appreciate the interaction. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think on Patreon, and sign up there as well if you have not already. Until the next time, folks, we'll be back next week with the balance breakdown for UFC Sao Paulo. Take care and look after